For by Brian for Utah.
The Management Minute is a service of the MBA program in the John M. Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University. I'm Scott Hammond. Words used by ambitious politicians are making their way into the workplace and poisoning collaborative relationships. We are quick to call an inaccuracy a lie, label someone who disagrees with us an enemy, and invoke the rhetoric of conflict by calling every challenge a fight and using every mistake as a reason to fire someone. Good leaders lower the temperature, listen carefully to criticism, and use the language of collaboration to build common ground. Learn more about good language and good leadership in an MBA program at Utah State University. Go to utahstatemba.com. That's utahstatemba.com. I'm Scott Hammond. Hope to see you in one of our classes.
It's official. KSL Sports is your official radio home of the Utah Hockey Club. When the puck hits the ice this fall, you'll hear every goal, every check, and every tension-filled moment on the KSL Sports Zone. Plus, let your voice be heard on the Utah Hockey Club Fan Forum on KSLSports.com, your exclusive home of the NHL and the Utah Hockey Club in Utah is KSL Sports and 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Here's Ricky Meese.
Crews are still cleaning up the accident in Taylorsville, northbound Bangerter Highway at 4700 South. You still have some backups in the area. Also, road work causing delays both directions of Mountain View Corridor, and this is going to be at about 114th South. Don't miss Park City Gallery Association's Art Stroll this Friday, 6 to 9 p.m., showcasing monthly inspiration and engaging fall themes. Shop, dine, and get inspired, supporting local. Visit parkcitygalleryassociation.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
A little warmer today with a high of 66, and we get back into the mid-70s this weekend, then drop into the 60s for Monday. Tuesday will be colder with rain likely. And right now, 57 degrees and sunny. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio. Inside Sources, an inside look at 2024 presidential politics.
Well, it is Friday, and every Friday we take an Inside Sources inside look at presidential politics. Many in the state of Utah and millions around the country have already received their ballots, cast their votes, and made their voices heard. Early voting turnouts are high in many areas around the nation, and that's always a good thing. Participation in our process is always vital to our ongoing constitutional republic. But for those who are in the waiting game, waiting for Election Day, or those who are still undecided, the campaigns are rushing down the final stretch to deliver their messages, tip the scales that might be in their favor to ultimately get a win. So let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
All right, well, I want to get underneath some of the headlines of the week. Again, we always recap what has been happening, where the candidates and where they have been, where their running mates have been. What does that look like? What are the message themes for the week? This has been a very interesting one. We're only 11 days out from the first Tuesday of November. And this week we saw some interesting things play out. We saw dueling town halls. Vice President Harris joined CNN to give her message to still undecided voters. Former President Trump declined on a town hall, but has been campaigning hard across the country, including a press conference that's still going on in Texas, talking about border security and immigration issues today. His running mate, J.D. Vance, held a town hall last night on News Nation, again, going after undecided voters. And so we want to get underneath those and look at what is it that they're saying and not saying, and are they saying it well, saying it right, or saying it in a way that's actually going to make a difference or have impact or influence on those who are still undecided or persuadable. There are some who have said, well, I'm going to vote for Vice President Harris, or I'm going to vote for former President Trump, but I could still change my mind. And so those are the ones that everyone is trying to target. So I want to get under a couple of things as it related to these town halls this week, because there were some good moments and some less than optimal, suboptimal, I guess you'd call that, moments for the candidates. And let's start with Vice President Harris. Again, she did a town hall with Anderson Cooper on CNN, and she was asked about her plan to address price gouging and inflated prices during emergency. Here's that exchange.
It's a real issue, and I'm not going to apologize for the fact that we need to actually deal with accountability when these, not all, in fact, most don't, but when companies are taking advantage of the desperation and the need of the American people. We saw it actually during the pandemic as well. Not to mention, by the way, again, Donald Trump should be here tonight to talk with you and answer your questions. He's not. He refused to come. But understand that part of his plan is to put in place a national sales tax of at least 20% on everyday goods and necessities. Would cost you as the American consumer and taxpayer an additional $4,000 a year.
Okay, so interesting pieces there. Again, a lot of sweeping elements there from the vice president. The issue was what she has said about price gouging. And that's one that is pretty nebulous in terms of, other than under extreme conditions, again, an emergency. But she didn't really go there at all. She was actually alluding at the end to some of the tariff proposals, but she didn't say it was tariffs. And so, again, it was kind of some sweeping generalities. Personally, I think the vice president is spending way too much time talking about the former president. I think she would be better served, again, as a strategy component, regardless of whether you like her policies or not. I think her strategy would be much better and more effective if she was talking about what she is for rather than what she's against. Everyone knows she's against the former president, and there's a long list of things to go over there. But she gets very scripted in that, and she gets a little redundant in that, and a little bit of word salady in that. We'll come back to that in a moment. She was also asked at this same town hall about her view on a border wall to increase border security. The vice president was left without a great place to go in her condemnation of former President Trump personally, but not his policy to build a wall. Take a listen to this.
We need a president who is grounded in common sense and practical outcomes. Like, let's just fix this thing. Let's just fix it. Why is there any ideological perspective on it? Let's just fix the problem.
To fix the problem, you're doing this compromise bill. It does call for $650 million that was earmarked under Trump to actually still go to build the wall.
I am not afraid of good ideas where they occurred.
So you don't think it's stupid anymore?
I think what he did and how he did it did not make much sense because he actually didn't do much of anything. I just talked about that wall, right? We just talked about it. He didn't actually do much of anything.
But you do want to build some wall.
I want to strengthen our border.
Now, this is one of the challenges for the vice president, and this is interesting. We're going to criticize equally today, and we'll commend equally today. And it was interesting to me that David Axelrod, of course, Democratic strategist, advisor to former President Barack Obama, has been in the middle of a lot of the Democratic conversations and strategy over the years. He has been very critical of Vice President Harris when it comes to these questions where she doesn't want to give the answer. And she goes into, he called it word salad city, and refuses to even answer the simple questions. In this same town hall, she was asked about support for Israel and went on for 7 minutes without answering the question, and went on to everything from border security to women's health care and everything in between on a international foreign relations question. And so it's an area where she's just got to tighten up because it undermines her credibility. And if she's only going where she's comfortable and what she says on the stump or what she repeats in campaign speeches, I think that undermines her credibility. Now, the flip side of that, of course, with former President Trump, he had an interesting week as it relates to his former chief of staff, General John Kelly, who described some of his authoritarian and fascist tendencies. And there's been an interesting debate back and forth in terms of what he said, what he meant, how did that play out, none of which are very good. And I don't think his response to any of those has been particularly effective either. He just did a very meandering press conference down in Texas and didn't really get to the heart of the issues. A lot of scare tactics, a lot of language that's inflammatory, a lot of language that's very divisive. None of it helpful in terms of what's the best policy. How do we move this forward? And so I think for the former president, again, looking at the undecided or persuadable voters, I don't think he's doing a very good job of making the case to those folks. And I don't think either side is doing a very good job with that. I don't think either side is doing a really good job talking to younger voters. And so all of those are problematic for both sides of the equations. Now, also interesting, let's go to the number 2 on the ticket, and let's talk about what happens in a debate, a town hall on News Nation. J.D. Vance was on with Chris Cuomo of News Nation, and here's the positive side of his message, a closing message on what he wanted to advocate, and take a look at.
And if you're discarding a lifelong friendship because somebody votes for the other team, then you've made a terrible, terrible mistake and you should do something different. Like, don't cast aside. Like, most of my family obviously is going to vote for, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. And if they're not, actually, I need to talk to them. But I've got friends who like me personally, acquaintances who aren't necessarily going to vote for me. That doesn't make them bad people. And we can't, this is my most important advice, whether you vote for me, whether you vote for Donald Trump, whether you vote for Kamala Harris, don't cast aside family members and lifelong friendships. Politics is not worth it. And I think if we follow that principle, we'll heal the divide in this country.
So that was a very positive, I think that's one of the best answers J.D. Vance has given since he became the vice presidential nominee a few months ago. That was a really strong piece to say, hey, I get it. I understand people who are going to vote for Harris and Walz, and I understand people who are going to vote for Trump and Vance. And that's something we can all take a look at. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to vote the same way. But there is a way to look at it and say, oh, I understand how you got there. I see what your priorities were. I see what you valued and what message you wanted to send. And that's okay. That's a good thing. I think his weaker moment in this News Nation town hall with J.D. Vance last night was his stance on the ongoing war in Ukraine. An interesting framing. Take a listen.
Russia shouldn't have invaded Ukraine in the first place. Both the Russians and the Ukrainians are exhausted. They're both struggling to find men. They're struggling to get the equipment necessary to send to the front lines. Their economies are exhausted. Whole parts of their country have been destroyed. Both of these parties want this war to end. And I think, unfortunately, you've got a lot of American leaders who like to beat their chest and say, well, this is the good guy and that's the bad guy. Look, yes, Russia should not have invaded Ukraine, but we are where we are. And what's in the best interest of America and what I believe is in the best interest of Ukraine and Russia is for the killing to stop.
So interesting framing there from J.D. Vance in terms of what's happening inside of Ukraine. Again, I don't think it was his sharpest or clearest message of the night, and contradicted himself and some of the things that he said in the past as well. So all of that very fascinating. I think the biggest thing to look at in all of this is that we have both sides at the presidential level that are spending far too much time bashing and belittling and demeaning and weaponizing the words of their opponents. And I get it. And actually, you know what? We all get it. There's only 11 days to go in the campaign, and we know who you are against. The question is, what are you for? And can you articulate that in an answer? Or do you simply have to go to the base politics, lowest common denominator, because that's what's really hurting us in the country, and it's undermining our confidence in the process and the confidence we need to have in what's next. In fact, the Washington Post made an interesting, extraordinary move announcing today that they would no longer endorse presidential candidates. They have endorsed every cycle since 1976, and they announced today that they will not be making an endorsement of a presidential candidate in this election nor in future elections. We're returning to our roots of not endorsing presidential candidates. And I think part of that is because for the Washington Post, they want to know what you're for, not just what you're against. And you don't get an endorsement from somebody based on what you're against. Got to be for something. We're going to stay with this question and conversation, go back to my conversation with Carly Cooperman, look at some of the polling across the country, what it means and what we should be looking for over the next 11 days. We'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. We're just 10 days away from the historic 2024 election.
I'm running for governor because you deserve partisanship, not unchecked power.
It's been an honor of a lifetime to serve as your governor. We've accomplished so much together.
Do your homework and get your ballot in the mail. Election week is coming, and we have you covered on KSL News Radio.
And now a minute of kindness brought to you by One Kind Act a Day. Lindsay Heinig, the director of Monticello Academy in West Valley City, has always embraced her calling as an educator. With 13 years at her school, she recognizes that kindness is at the heart of every meaningful relationship among the students. Lindsay fosters an environment where collaboration and friendship flourish, encouraging children to acknowledge the small acts of kindness that create lasting bonds. Lindsay believes that when we consciously choose kindness, we fill our hearts with joy, a sentiment she hopes to instill in her young students. Through her unwavering dedication, she shapes young minds and nurtures compassionate citizens, reminding us of the profound impact in even the smallest acts of kindness. Find out more about how you can be involved online at thepowerofkind.org. That's thepowerofkind.org.
What's up, everybody? I'm Mike Wilson with Any Hour Services, and there's a good chance you've heard me talking about our free furnace sale. The one where you buy a new air conditioner and we give you a new furnace for just the cost to install it, about $400. Well, we still have a few more spots on our schedule we need to fill, so I'm extending the sale, but I'm not quite sure for how much longer. Definitely no later than the end of October. And once I think our schedule's full enough, I got to pull these ads. So don't wait too long to call and schedule your free estimate. The main reason we do this sale is to give you an incentive to help us keep our guys busy when the weather's mild. And thanks to your help, we're able to keep our guys and keep growing. So if your furnace and air conditioner are ready to be replaced, you owe it to yourself to at least schedule a free estimate and get all the details about our free furnace sale. Just to recap, when you have Any Hour Services install a new air conditioner, we'll give you a new furnace for just the cost to install it. About $400. The furnace is free, you just pay the labor. If you think you might be interested, call Any Hour Services at 801-443-7400. You can Google Any Hour Services. You can even schedule online at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Drivers who switch and save with Progressive could save hundreds, which could be life-changing. I mean, you could put that money towards concert tickets for your daughter to see that singer who sings about painful breakups. And one song will inspire your little beauty to break up with that beast she's dating, Brian. Instead, she'll date someone who's nice and worthy of her love, not someone who addresses you and your spouse as bro. And it's all because you could save money switching at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates, not available in all states.
Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. So at Consumer Cellular, we're lowering the price for those 50 and up. Now you can get unlimited talk, text, and data for $30 a line when you buy two. That's just $60 a month for 2 unlimited lines. So if you're 50 and up, make the switch and save. Come on, you've earned this. Call 1-888-FREEDOM or visit consumercellular.com today. Requires 2 lines of service, age validation, and credit approval, subject to system and area limits, taxes, and other fees apply.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, the headlines, of course, continue to focus on swing states and swing voters within swing states. So the question then that we should be thinking about is, what are those swing voters actually looking for? What are they questioning? And is there a group of those who maybe aren't just in the undecided, but are they just the contrarians who tend to vote against whatever party is in power? And really thrilled to have joining us back on the program once again, Carly Cooperman, who, of course, is the CEO of Schoen Cooperman Research, global strategic research consulting firm, and the best of the best, and have a great piece in The Hill looking at these swing voters. And Carly, welcome back to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me back.
So here we are. We're 14 days away. We're inside the bubble, to be sure. And I can't imagine what I know you're just sitting around with nothing to do for the next 14 days. But I know you've been taking a close look at these swing voters. Get us a sense of who they are. Who are the swing voters in these swing states? And then we'll talk about strategy for each of the campaigns in terms of how they get to them.
Yeah, so we recently looked at polling where we came out of the field and looked at those who say that they're still undecided on who they're going to vote for, or that they have a preference but that they could change their mind. And so, there's a lot of different definitions that people use to identify a swing voter, but right now what we thought is that, in the final 2 weeks of the campaign, these people who truly aren't sure yet who they're going to vote for or who we want to understand their sentiments and what they're thinking. We saw that demographically, these people tend to skew younger, under 40, and they also are more independent or moderate in terms of how they identify ideologically or by party. And also, I think one thing that's really noticeable about these people is that they're generally pessimistic about the country. They're pessimistic about how things are going, a little bit less engaged and less knowledgeable about, the positions the candidates stand for. And they don't really love either candidate. So that's kind of the starting point about these people.
Yeah.
And then what we found, so then just to give you the quick high-level overview is that, looking at who they're going to vote for, by a 5-point margin, they say that they will support Harris, but that's only 34 to 29%. A large percent are still undecided. And when we look in the layers underneath this, it actually seems like a lot of metrics of these voters are kind of more supportive towards Trump.
Yeah, and let's get underneath those numbers, because that's what I thought was so fascinating in your piece in The Hill today, was looking at some of the things where you can say, okay, that looks like it might be an advantage to Harris and the Harris-Walz campaign, and then you look underneath some of those numbers, and you start thinking, well, maybe they're a little more inclined policy-wise to the former president. Kind of break that down for us.
Yeah, so what happens is we also look at the issues that are most important to these voters, and not surprisingly, the economy, inflation, immigration, these issues are top of mind to these voters who are undecided or swing voters. And when we ask who they trust more to address each of these issues, we found that Trump leads Harris on trust by significant margins in all of these issues. And so while in terms of the vote, there's a lean towards Harris, actually, when it comes down to what's important to them and what's driving the day and who they trust, by larger gaps in the overall electorate, these voters say that they trust Trump on these issues than Harris. So there's significant difference in margins there in terms of these issues.
Yeah. So as we look at the strategy now in terms of how each of these campaigns go after it, that gets to be a really interesting look at the numbers in terms of what it is or what the messaging strategy might be or what the messaging strategy hasn't been that have prevented these folks from actually locking in and getting behind a candidate.
Yeah. So one other thing I think is worth mentioning is that we asked voters in terms of concerns about the candidates and, this kind of thing to get at the messaging. And so we found that there was a slightly more plurality of voters, 39%, say that they are concerned that Harris is too far to the left versus 35% say that they're more concerned that Trump is too far to the right. This is one of the messaging things in terms of Harris's perspective that, she needs to be able to convince these people that she is moderate politically. The one thing Harris is going for her with these voters is that they consider her more of the change candidate than Trump. We know that these voters want change. And so in terms of when they think about who represents change, that is Harris for these voters. Harris would need to do more to articulate what she would do in these positions. People don't feel like they know enough about her. She's talked about an opportunity economy, but people have little idea of how she would improve the day-to-day cost of living for them and how she would improve the economy for them. So that's that. But from Trump's perspective, he has this advantage on issues, but he is spending so much time talking about immigration that he really needs to come back to a more economic-centered message because that is something that's going to drive people even more than concerns about immigration and, talking about the cost of living and, tax cuts and just things in terms of inflation and just the things that are impacting their day to day. He needs to come back to a messaging story that it's going to bring it back to the economy and a little bit less on immigration.
Yeah, that focus is always crucial, especially coming down the home stretch. Where do you spend your time? Where do you give your attention? What do you really emphasize in those waning days? You also mentioned in the piece something that I found just really interesting. And you alluded to it earlier, that a lot of these voters, again, swing voters in swing states, that they do have a little bit of a pessimistic view in terms of right track, wrong track. And they tend to be a little contrarian in terms of, who's in power, regardless of which political party. Describe that for us.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. We found among this group of people that about 6 in 10 say that the country is headed on the wrong track. And we asked if things have gotten better or worse or have stayed the same in the last 4 years. 59% say that they think things have worsened in the U.S. over the last 4 years. So it's not totally surprising if you think about it. These people that at the end of the election really aren't sure who they want to vote for. They're discouraged, they're disengaged, they're frustrated with how things are going. So we see that, it's not like there's a great deal of satisfaction among voters and among Americans generally, but these people really are frustrated with both parties. I mean, they give negative ratings to both presidential candidates. They're frustrated with what they feel is the status quo, with what the political system is generally.
Yeah, and do you get a sense at all in terms of these voters? Are they still likely to show up on Election Day, or are they going to be so exhausted and exasperated that they might just throw up their hands and stay home?
I think it's going to be a mix of both, honestly. I mean, in terms of when we poll, we have filters to take out people who say that they're not likely to vote, but they're still, I think, at the end of the day, and this is a concern among the candidates, that there will be some of these people who are disengaged and might just decide to vote for neither candidate. Now, looking at what the candidates are doing in the last 2 weeks of the election, we see Trump particularly is making a push to try to reach low propensity voters, these people who are frustrated with both, because he's got this anti-systemic, anti-establishment message that to some extent is connecting with some of these people. Whereas you see Harris out there trying to reach more independents and, more moderate Republicans or Republicans that don't really like Trump.
Yeah. And then finally, give us one thing that is a little under the headlines that you're keeping your eye on with 14 days to go.
I'm studying this swing state data very carefully that's coming out. And I'm looking for other signs because these races are so neck and neck. But metrics, beyond the issues, we know what issues are most important to voters right now. And I do think Harris has made some inroads in terms of Trump's advantage on those issues. But I think at the end of the day, this is also coming down to just that gut feeling, how you feel about the candidate. And so questions that speak to, how these candidates fit in terms of, are they too far left or too far right? Do they represent change? Are these the kind of people you feel like could lead? I think those are kind of a little bit more telling, and those things are really interesting when you study these swing state polls that are kind of indicating last-minute shifts that might come down to at the end of the day. I really think it's going to be about that and less about the issues ultimately, because a lot of that is really baked in.
It's my conversation with Carly Cooperman, one of the best in the polling business. A lot to think about as we continue our Inside Sources inside look at presidential politics. We'll step aside for bottom of the hour news. More Inside Sources coming up next.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story this hour. And we have breaking news. The firefighters who fought the fire in Holiday yesterday at a duplex now say it was started by a child playing with a lighter. That fire at 60th South and 2075 East injured 8 people, including 6 first responders. Unified Fire says the home was a complete loss. Analysts at Wallet Hub don't think Salt Lake City is one of the premier cities for baseball. They only have Utah's capital ranked number 53 for the best baseball cities in America. But State Representative Ryan Wilcox, who sponsored the bill to help fund a future MLB stadium, doesn't agree.
We're the 4th fastest growing market in Major League Baseball, nowhere near 53. 4th compared to existing Major League markets, ranking 2nd among potential expansion markets.
The study bases a lot of the scores off existing teams, success, and ticket prices. Wilcox says if a vote for MLB expansion were held today, though, Salt Lake City would get the thumbs up. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Former President Trump and his running mate have been targeted in a hacker attack on their phones. ABC News says not clear whether hackers were able to actually access the phones or what content may have been compromised. The Trump campaign did not respond to a request for comment. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average down on the day now 251 points, while the NASDAQ was up by 120. And our KSL weather looks like a warming weekend, but then things cool off next week. That's coming up. KSL News Time, 1:32.
It's a priority for us at this station to bring you all sides of a story and to talk about the news fairly, completely.
Get all the facts and be really aware. Utah's Morning News with us, Tim and Amanda.
Weekday mornings 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Hi, this is Doug Wright with yet another great experiment you can try right there at home. I want you to take 4 bags of water softener salt. Lift 3 of the bags with one hand, good luck on that, and 1 bag with your other hand. Now, if you're like most people, you'll probably find that 3 bags of salt weigh about 3 times as much as 1 bag of salt. And that's an important thing to keep in mind when you're shopping for a water softener. You see, Connecticut of Utah, an authorized Connecticut dealer, their water softeners are so well designed, they use only 1 bag of salt for every 3 that other water softeners use. Now, I can't speak for you, but I'm not a fan of lower back pain, and as our little experiment has hopefully demonstrated, carrying that 1 bag of salt, it's a lot easier on your back than carrying 3. That's just one of the many reasons you should look into water softeners from Connecticut of Utah, an authorized Connecticut dealer. To learn more, call Connecticut of Utah, 801-576-8600, or go to softwaterutah.com.
Offer not valid in all states or where prohibited by law. Loans are subject to lender approval. See website for details.
Meet Brian. He just got $5,000, and it was pretty easy. I'll tell you how in 10 seconds. Brian needed cash help. After being rejected by banks, he tried 27cash.com. Told them how much he needed, even let them know he had bad credit. In minutes, 27cash.com found a lender who deposited $5,000 into his bank account the very next day. If you need cash help, even if you have bad credit, go to 27cash.com. 27cash.com.
This is the story of the one. As a warehouse manager, her job is to transform chaos into clarity and to see patterns where others see problems. Luckily, she's got a partner who shares her perspective. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products, backed by real-person support and in-depth online resources, so she can tackle every task with precision and turn potential setbacks into streamlined success. Call clickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
You do countless things without a second thought to protect your family and home. Every time you're in the car, you buckle your seatbelt. Before the next load of laundry, you remove the dryer lint. When you head out, you always lock your doors. And one simple task, done far less often, can protect your family and home this winter. Schedule a furnace inspection by a certified heating contractor to check for safety and efficiency. A friendly reminder from Enbridge Gas.
Did you know 96% of Americans lose an average of $111,000 in Social Security income? And it's because they claim their benefits at the wrong time. Don't lose $111,000 in Social Security income that's rightfully yours. Learn how you could wring every nickel out of your benefits on Retirement Solutions Radio this Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock, right here on KSL, News Radio 1027.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Sinclair's Dino Pay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. And here's Ricky Meese.
We have had a couple of problems on the surface streets downtown Salt Lake City. An accident between 4th and 5th South and between 2nd and 3rd West, and Salt Lake City PD wrapping up an accident at 1100 South and 200 West. If you're traveling I-15 or any of the other Valley freeways, right now it's a delay-free drive. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
A little bit warmer today with a high of 66, and we get into the mid-70s this weekend, then drop back to the 60s on Monday. Tuesday will be colder with rain likely. 59 and sunny right now. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
As the world becomes more digitized, a fascinating transformation is reshaping how we engage with politics. The rise of social media and digital footprints has created an unprecedented level of scrutiny and accessibility to politicians' lives. And with millennials now entering positions of power, bringing with them decades of online history, we're witnessing the emergence of a new political landscape where the lines between public service, celebrity culture, and personal privacy are increasingly being blurred, if not completely erased. So the question that we need to think again about what we think we know is, what will the future of democracy look like in an always online world? A fascinating piece today at The Dispatch, you can read it at thedispatch.com, about these very online politics and what that is going to mean. Catherine D. is an internet culture reporter and host of The Computer Room, and Catherine joins us on the line. Catherine, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Brilliant piece. This is so fascinating to me. We used to think of, it was about a gaffe moment at a speech or, something that happened when you were in high school or something you wrote in someone's high school yearbook. We have totally blown past all of that with this always online world. Give us a sense in terms of what you've been watching and what we should be maybe thinking again about when it comes to online.
Yeah, so especially for millennials, they were the first digital native generation. So they're always on. I mean, we're all always online, right? And we don't really think carefully about what we're posting because there's no logging on and then logging off. It's just sort of our consciousness broadcast out to everyone. So people, are saying whatever pops into their head in group chats, or they're tweeting random things, or they're getting angry at complete nonsense. And this obviously opens the door to being, the less than flattering screenshots. And now we're in a position where basically everyone has skeletons in their closet because we're not filtered.
Right.
It's everything that's popping into our head we're posting, and this presents some issues for politics.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, when someone moves up the food chain in politics or runs for a higher office, that scrutiny gets a little tighter, and now it's getting into spaces that are just really almost in the bizarro world as people are just digging and digging and digging and looking at things that were cached or things that were in group texts and chats. Makes it a very interesting vetting process, and I know all of those in the political consulting world, those who do opposition research are having a heyday in a lot of that. But how do we look at that in the proper context, and what should we be thinking about what we start to hear or what we start to recognize, especially, as you mentioned, these up-and-coming politicians who have always been online?
I think part of it is that this information is less meaningful than it might have been in an earlier era. There's so much of it, and we're in a really strange situation where because people are posting whatever pops into their head, people go through phases that are difficult to contextualize in the physical world. Information that ordinarily would have been super meaningful in a completely physical context is now it's less meaningful. So if someone says something a little off kilter in a chat, right? There's obviously a line, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't. This isn't. You can say and do whatever you like, but I think that we're going to see a lower barrier to entry for what's considered scandalous, just because there's so much of ourselves, and nobody's perfect, right? It used to be that these parts of our personalities and our inner worlds were much more hidden, but that's just not the case anymore.
Yeah, and look back historically, you think of George W. Bush and a DUI when he was in college coming up, and that being such a big thing, or a Bill Clinton, did he inhale or did he just, not quite inhale it all the way? Those kinds of things, which are now just so far downstream, as you said, kind of a lower bar in all of that. Talk to us for a minute about something else you had in your piece, which was the fandomization of politics. And while we've always had a bit of fan crushes on, a JFK and Camelot or kind of the Reagan-esque kind of things in terms of celebrity. What does the new kind of fan culture bring to the political space, and what should we be watching for there?
There's two main things here. First, politicians are leaning into being fan objects, right? AOC gets referenced a lot in this conversation, but she's sort of the perfect example because she really was the first one to lean into this internet personality persona, and it almost overshadows her actual position as a politician, right? Her rise to fame is in large part because she was leaning so far into this personality as a celebrity.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. So you people need to be mindful about TikTok, Instagram, whatever social media platform it may be, and they're also voluntarily showing a lot of themselves, right? There's a much more direct line to not just constituents but fans, people who see them like they are celebrities. And then the other side of this is the way people view politicians is more similar to the way that we viewed celebrities in the past. Like there's one way to look at, in the piece I started off by describing how people were just rifling through J.D. Vance's digital trash. That's the sort of thing you see all the time with like teenagers who are obsessed with, a particular singer, right? It's like this hunger for all this information. It's not necessarily like relevant information, right? It's just trying to get to know them as a person and having an emotional investment in their personality as opposed to their policies, right? And there is always a little bit of that, but the scales have tipped in such a way where representing yourself as a likable or memeable persona is so much more important. And then there's other sort of more obvious things that are downstream of this, which is like merch, fan art, fan fiction, people sort of inventing things about you. Another politician who really had this kind of like weird fandom relationship was Beto O'Rourke. If you remember that like there was a really weird thing going on there where it's like, who remembers what he even stood for? It was like so much about like how people received him, but in turn how he was engaging with those people as well.
Yeah, no question. And so interesting in terms of how that continues to break down, as you said, some of the merchandise, the communities that form around it, which is always an interesting thing, an important thing for politicians, especially when they're trying to raise money. So all of that becomes so fascinating. This is a great piece. You need to go check this out at thedispatch.com. Catherine D., again, an internet culture reporter and host of The Computer Room. And this is just a fabulous piece. And Catherine, thanks so much for joining us today. Great stuff.
All right. Thanks. Have a great day.
All right, that's Catherine D. joining us, internet culture reporter, host of The Computer Room. And all of this online is really blurring the lines between politics and fandom and celebrity. And I'm not sure it's leading us to better discussions about principle and good public policy. We'll be right back.
This is Jeff Stout with Fink and McGregor, Mortgages Made Simple. There are lots of mortgage lenders out there, so why choose Fink and McGregor? Here are some good reasons. We are a broker. That means we can shop loan terms on your behalf, including loan programs, rates, and closing costs. We make it easy. We can take your application within a few short minutes, either on the phone or in person, on our fast application website, 4minutemortgage.com. We can help sift through options to find the best solution for you. This can include loan programs, credit fixes, or loan strategies. We are fast, really fast. Most loans close within a couple weeks. Start to finish, we are here for you. Apply today at 4minutemortgage.com. Fink and McGregor, Mortgages Made Simple, 801-264-9494. That's 264-9494. Or on the web at finkmcgregor.com. NMLS 289115.
KSL Broadcast Group contests are open to participants 13 years of age and older that are residents of Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, and Nevada, unless otherwise specified. Employees or agents of the station, Bonneville International Corporation, or other area radio stations, or any entity associated with the contest may not enter. Persons who have won in the last 90 days from the station contest or event are not eligible. Full general contest rules are available at kslnewsradio.com.
Hey, what are you doing up on the step stool?
About to clean these light fixtures. The whole family's coming over, and if there's even a speck of dust in the house, my abuela will find it.
Here, I got a Swiffer duster to help with that.
A Swiffer what?
A Swiffer duster. It has this cool extendable handle that reaches 6 feet to get high and low, with fluffy dusters that easily trap and lock dust.
So, no more step stool?
No more step stool.
Easily trap and lock dust from hard-to-reach places with the Swiffer duster. Love it or your money back.
Febreze. So my home is also my office, and before I can focus, every room's gotta be clean. That means tidying up and spraying my Febreze Air Mist. Ooh, that's fresh. Febreze Air Mist scents are all high quality. They fight any weird funk, and they give my air an instant boost of freshness. So not only does my home smell good, I feel good too. After I Febreze, it's time to start my day. Breathe happy, Febreze, la 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 la.
Getting help with electrical repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Most of us like to be out in the sun. That's why sunscreen and other safety measures are key to protecting your skin from aging and cancer. The FDA recommends using a sunscreen with an SPF of 15 or higher. Also, look for broad spectrum on the label. That means both harmful ultraviolet A and B rays are blocked. Remember, SPF plus broad spectrum equal healthy fun in the sun. Visit www.fda.gov/sunscreen for more information. A message from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration.
Dave and Debbie.
It's impossible to digest and consume all of the news that's now coming at us through either social media or through web pages or through the radio. Pick what is most impactful in your life and focus on that. And that's what Dave and I do every single morning. We pick those issues that are most important to our listeners and we boil it down so it's digestible. It's simple to understand.
I think we're trying to find the essence of the story. You know, you can't be an expert on all things, but that doesn't mean you can't be curious and really find out more and educate yourself and learn the complexities of an issue. But I think all of us start at ground zero on everything. Ask questions, show that curiosity.
And then if you need more research, you can always go to KSLNewsRadio.com and learn more.
Listen for Dave and Dejanovic 9 to noon on KSL News Radio.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, the team trying to bring Major League Baseball to Utah says Salt Lake would get an expansion team right now based on their current criteria. Second, police have determined a child playing with a lighter caused a house fire in Holiday yesterday. 8 people were injured there. And third, ABC News reports phones used by former President Trump and his running mate were targeted by Chinese hackers. 59 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
The landscape of higher education is changing, being shaped by technological advancement, evolving workplace dynamics, and shifting cultural values. Traditional academic practices face unprecedented challenges as new definitions of success emerge in our digital age. All of that is making students approach their educations a little bit different from generations in the past. Skills like reading are becoming less crucial and critical for students, but with the relationship between education, career preparation, and personal fulfillment becoming increasingly complex, what does that actually mean, and what should we be worried about? What should we be trying to move forward on? And this is a real crucial conversation. Jonathan Malesic teaches writing at Southern Methodist University, is author of The End of Burnout, and has a brilliant piece at the New York Times today, a good reason college students don't read anymore. And welcome to the show.
Thanks, Boyd. Yeah, it's great to be here.
So let's dive into this. Obviously, the name of the game when it comes to winning at higher education has evolved a little bit, and students are clearly evolving. And how is that impacting how much they actually read?
Right. There's so much angst right now among college and university faculty about students' reading habits and reading ability and all of that. And I think that, most faculty that I talk to are assigning less reading, partly because they find either that students' ability to handle long readings has diminished over the years, or their simple willingness to. And that's certainly the case with me. I opened the essay by talking about a class I taught 13 years ago, where I assigned 9 books, which is a lot. It was too many.
I love that, by the way.
But yeah, I haven't been assigning nearly as many in recent years for a lot of reasons. But one is just concern that, gosh, if I assign a longer, couple of books, will students read it?
Yeah, and so as you look at navigating that, I actually really like your reading list on that particular class as well. And so kind of walk us through, what is it that professors are saying, hey, I'm not going to do as much, but what's the impact of that? What are we seeing on the back end?
It's hard to say. I mean, I see students at the front end. So I teach first year college writing. Most of my students are straight out of high school. Some are transfers from community college. And, there is a range of interest and willingness to read. I don't know on the back end, and the concern that I have is that, students are making a rational decision in not prioritizing reading, because I think that the way that we sell careers to students is one where, it's just reacting to whatever is happening in the moment in your environment. Long-term planning is not so much a priority, at least in the picture of business that we're giving to students.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting thing that the kind of society is pushing on there in terms of what the dynamics are, what life after education and college actually look like. We've been talking a lot this week about some of the hopeful elements of the rising generation. You pointed this out in your piece at the Times, talking about that there are clearly some things that we should be worried about when it comes to our young people, but there's also some things that should give us some hope. Give us your perspective on why we should be hopeful with this rising generation.
Yeah, I think that the reason to be hopeful is that, even if students' incentive is not to take their reading seriously or, learning in general seriously, and to prioritize whatever, social life or internships or something like that, there's always a spark within every student, I think, who is ready to resist those incentives, who recognizes that, there is more to life. And that spark is stronger in some than others, but it's really there. And, I see it every semester, and it's really a question of, how much to just to mix metaphors, how much to cultivate that spark, and how much how likely it is that it'll really burst into flame.
Yeah.
In a good way.
Yeah. On the concern side, I think a lot of businesses, I think a lot of people in society are questioning, that we are getting away from this desire to read, that we tend to skim headlines, that we scan articles, that we go to TikTok or to YouTube and pick something up. How are you seeing that? Again, I know you're on the front end with a lot of these students, but how do you see it impacting their ability to process information, to think creatively, and to interact with the world around them, with the fact that we're kind of doing this doom scrolling social media approach to a lot of our knowledge intake?
Yeah, I think about it in terms of students availing themselves of the resources that they have in front of them. And students tell me, of their own volition that, in their classes, they might not understand a lecture, or they might not be paying attention, or they might miss class for whatever reason. And they're like, well, I'll learn about this through YouTube. And, I think, oh my gosh, you're paying all this money to have this expert who's here for you, who wants you to learn, who's, can give you one-on-one instruction in office hours if you need it. And students aren't availing themselves of that. Like, they've got these amazing resources right at their fingertips, but they're often turning to what I think are lesser resources, but that are more convenient. And I don't know how to convince students to take advantage of the amazing resources that a college or university offers them.
Yeah, and it is so hard with kind of the instant gratification of what you can get online versus really plowing into a book and digging into some of those principles and strategies. Give us one last thing, Jonathan, in terms of things that we ought to be thinking about as we interact with young people. Hopefully, I always say, great writing starts with great reading, and that, good thinking and all of that. All of those are so interconnected. How do we reestablish the importance or the kind of the compelling why for students as to why they ought to engage in that kind of learning?
Yeah, I think that the why, and there's a few. I mean, one, there is great stuff that is written and is worth reading. Second, I think, is that reading for pleasure it can be kind of an act of asserting your humanity. You are a human being. You're not just a worker. You're not just someone who can help someone else make money. You have your own mind and your own heart, and reading can help cultivate that.
Yeah, I love that. Great perspective. Jonathan Malesic teaches writing at Southern Methodist University, author of The End of Burnout. Great piece at the New York Times. You can check that out at the NewYorkTimes.com. There's a very good reason college students don't read anymore. And Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us today. Great perspective.
Thank you for having me, Boyd.
All right. Great stuff there from Jonathan Malesic. Again, it's an article in the Times, NewYorkTimes.com. And Jonathan joins us from Southern Methodist University today. And I think this is an interesting one. It's one that I worry about. Part of it is just the fact that to read a book and to just read something takes time, and it forces you to slow down and to really think and process and absorb and reflect. And I think all of those are crucial skills that go way beyond whether or not you can pass a class and get a degree at a university, or even get out of high school. They're things that I think connect to not just the intellect, but to the soul and to the way that we interact with others, the way that we understand the world around us and those human beings we interact with in that world around us. And I think reading has to be part of what we do moving forward if we're going to continue to improve and grow as a society. All right, that wraps up hour number one of Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. We'll step aside for some top-of-the-hour news. Don't go anywhere. We're going to kick off hour number two with Usma Udine is going to join us with a brilliant piece. Stick around. We'll be right back.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, this is KSL News Radio.
Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bonas. KSL's top local story this hour. Investigators say yesterday's fire at a duplex in Holiday was caused by a child playing with a lighter. That fire at 60th South and 2075 East injured 8 people, including 6 first responders. Unified Fire says the home was a complete loss. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints announced today that President Russell M. Nelson will dedicate the Deseret Peak, Utah Temple on Sunday, November 10th in Tooele. That dedication will be a milestone for the church, marking its 200th operating temple worldwide. And the ceremony will be broadcast to church meeting houses in the Temple District. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. President Biden went to Arizona today to offer the nation's apology to Native American children who were forced to attend government boarding schools.
For too long, this nation sought to silence the voices of generations of Native children. But now, your voices are being heard.
Children at the schools were often punished for speaking their own languages and often abused, and some even died. Your money at this moment. The Dow Jones average down on the day now 259 points, while the NASDAQ was up by 103. And our KSL weather looks like a sunny weekend and warming up a bit. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:01.
Here's a way to get breaking news updates anywhere you go.
At the store or in a work meeting, you can get breaking news on your phone.
You can quickly read it, swipe, or click for more. It's super discreet, super fast.
That's the app for KSL News Radio.
Hey, can you blow up some balloons for Jack's party?
I can't. I'm so congested.
You need Sinex Saline from Vicks.
Sinex Saline Nasal Spray?
Yeah, just Sinex. Breathe.
Sinex Saline instantly clears everyday congestion associated with colds and year-round allergies with a gentle, ultra-fine mist that's no mess and easy to control.
Daddy, we need more balloons.
On it.
Enjoy life's important moments without congestion. Try Sinex Saline from Vicks. Just Sinex. Breathe. Use as directed.
Mommy, want to play a game with me and Dad?
Mommy's not feeling good.
You need to vaporize that cold.
Vaporize?
Yeah, with Dayquil VapoCool. It's Dayquil plus a rush of Vicks vapors.
Whoa.
Come on, honey. Let's let Mommy rest.
You guys are amazing. And so is Dayquil VapoCool.
Dayquil VapoCool, the vaporizing daytime coughing, aching, fever, power through your day medicine. And to vaporize sore throat pain, try Vicks VapoCool drops. Use as directed. Keep out of reach of children.
Tim and Amanda.
Do I look forward to reporting the news? Yes, insofar as it helps me understand what's happening.
We know that it's important information that's going to impact people's lives, and so that makes the job of reporting the news that day easier.
Utah's Morning News between 5 and 9 on KSL News Radio.
Ever been burned by a contractor? Monday, a Utah family thought they hired a pro, but after paying big bucks, all they got was a big hole in their yard.
Called them, texted them, couldn't get a hold of them. There appears to be a bit of a pattern here.
Then, Tuesday, Matt Gephardt investigates why current laws often leave consumers stuck.
It doesn't feel like justice.
And what steps you can take to protect yourself. Unfinished business, shady contractors, 2 stories that could save you thousands. Monday and Tuesday on KSL 5 News at 10.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Here's Ricky Meese.
We've had a lot of construction and an earlier crash that's tangled up traffic in Taylorsville on northbound Bangerter Highway at 4700 South. You can get through the area and the delays have cleared, but still something you want to consider. A little bit of heavy and slow traffic southbound I-15, 5600 South Roy and 7200 South Midvale. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
A little bit warmer today with a high of 66. We'll get into the mid-70s this weekend, and then drop back into the 60s on Monday. By Tuesday, it'll be colder with rain likely. 60 degrees and sunny right now. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com for Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, the headlines from many political figures and many in the Washington, D.C. swamp culture are constantly painting the U.S. Supreme Court as a divisive, mostly partisan institution. So we're going to get beyond the headlines on this show. We're going to get underneath that. And rather than being a divisive force, could it be that the highest court in our nation is one of the great unifiers? And can it be a unifier in our culture? Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
We are thrilled to have joining us back on the program today, Asma Uddin. She is an attorney, a Deseret contributing writer, and author of When Islam is Not a Religion, Inside America's Fight for Religious Freedom, and also The Politics of Vulnerability, How to Deal with Muslim-Christian Relations in a Post-Christian America. She's also a Pluralism Fellow at the Mercatus Center and also is affiliated with Georgetown University and one of our favorite guests. And Usma, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back.
Brilliant piece on the Supreme Court and how it should not be this dividing space in the nation, but that it actually has some power in there to actually be part of the healing and reuniting of the nation. Explain that for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think too often we see all of these decisions coming out of the court that the most Americans, to the extent they hear about it at all, and I think increasingly people do, but they hear about it through this sort of like very divisive frame, either by media sources or the way it's being talked about on social media. And the fact is that we can talk about the sort of like the on-the-ground effects and how to fix that, but the Supreme Court holds like this such a huge sort of cultural role in our democracy, and with the ability to shape an inclusive constitutional culture if it just has the right tools to do that. And so my piece kind of like explores how it could really kind of leverage its unique position, its powerful position in a way that could perhaps get through to more Americans.
Yeah, it's such an important thing. We do see it divisive in terms of where we often land with a lot of the culture war kinds of issues and some of those things. And even within those, I love the way you pulled this out in your piece, that even on things like the Dobbs decision or the cake baker situation and that ruling, that even within those, there was actually some space there for the court to be more of a unifying mechanism as opposed to just more division, winner-take-all kind of thing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, the piece also, it kind of takes the reader through a couple of other major works that are part of this larger body of writing and scholarship where scholars are beginning to question whether or not our rights-based framework is a good thing. There's something about sort of the absolutism that they say, like, okay, you win and I lose, or I lose and you win, that tends to kind of silence or erase so many of the inherent complexities of a particular dispute, particularly these bigger cultural conflicts. And it's important, and I think when you talk about Dobbs and you talk about a number of other cases at the court, I think that's certainly how it's interpreted, that like just one group lost and the other group won. And how is it that even as the court comes to sort of decisive decisions about what is the right legal answer in a particular case, how it can still create a sense of inclusivity so people don't feel that they lost somehow, that they're still part of the constitutional dialogue.
Yeah, and that getting to that nuance, and even in the opinions, I know you spend a lot of time kind of in those rhetorical strategies, and just the words have meaning and the meaning matter. And I think even the way some of those cases, as they were, adjudicated, as those opinions were written out, again, even within there was some ways to maybe do that just a little bit different.
Yes, I mean, and I think it's like, especially these types of cases where the court has plenty of signals that this is going to be a major sort of like cultural moment. And there are very sort of like even objective ways for the court to figure that out. For example, the number of amicus briefs, that is briefs filed by people and interest groups that are not part of the actual litigation, the amount of publicity a case is getting, things like that. And so they have to be sort of like more attuned to the fact that the public is going to be listening and send those messages, right? Like we understand that there are concerns and we want to let you know that that's something that we consider to be a matter of something that requires attention, right? And we're giving it attention. And so, I mean, there's a lot more there. I think when you talk about Dobbs and when you talk about the court and the way that it talked about history, of course, like the attack that many people used afterwards was like, well, which version of history and why are we being cut out of the sort of like narrative of American history? And so I think the court could have anticipated that and done better to address some of those concerns.
Yeah, no question. One of the graphs that I just loved in your piece was talking about this recognition that the opinions of the court are not just these boring, dry legal documents, but I love the way you framed it, cultural artifacts that shape our understanding of what it means to be American. Unpack that a little bit for us.
Yeah, I mean, the court holds a very unique position in American democracy, a position that no other institution really does. And one part of that is the fact that, unlike the political branches, its opinions span across multiple generations, which gives it the power to form our cultural narrative in many ways. And a lot of people sometimes, like some resistance to the proposal that I laid out in my piece is, well, we don't really want the court to be playing this type of role. Like, we don't want it to be some sort of like model for inclusivity or morality or anything else. I'm like, well, whether you want it or not is a totally separate issue. The fact of the matter is that it is, right? And it plays this role, and it plays this role in both ways. Like, there are plenty of examples from our history where its language was divisive, and it actually led to a lot of persecution of vulnerable groups. And so whether it likes it or not, it has this role, and it needs to take it seriously.
Yeah. Oh, I love that you pointed that out because that's such a powerful component to all of this. You also framed out, we always like to get to the and questions rather than the either or the fake fights and the false choices. You said that that the approach balances competing values and leaves room for democratic deliberation. Kind of walk us through what that might look like if we were doing that a little bit better in the country.
If you think about the justices as kind of like advice givers, right? Like, not sort of these moral superiors, but people who understand our Constitution and are sort of creating a particular framework that they allow people to negotiate within, right? So we have a number of cases dealing with religion and LGBTQ rights. And time after time, you see the court kind of like, I actually give it credit in a number of these cases, less so in the piece, but in some of my other writing, where they're coming to like these very narrow decisions. And even as they come to the narrow decisions, though, they sort of begin to hint at what might be a better way for people to actually, to move forward from that. Like, so if we haven't clearly decided whether or not Christian cake bakers can turn away same-sex couples, in terms of making a wedding cake for them. They didn't actually decide that issue in Masterpiece Cake Shop, but to the extent that they sort of talked about the twin vulnerabilities on each side, it sort of said to Americans, okay, go, this is the framework that we're going to give to you. You negotiate within that framework. Come to an answer that kind of works for everyone. And so I think that there's space for more of that. That's there needs to be more intentionality in how the court is creating that framework for people. But that's kind of what I meant by just sort of giving advice moving forward.
Yeah, I love that, and I think it's so vital. One of the questions I've been dying to ask you, Usma, is so often we see when Congress fails to do its job or it abdicates its authority to the executive branch. And the executive branch can, regardless of which political party is in power, they gladly take that and they use that, or they do things by executive order. And then as soon as that happens, then someone files a lawsuit and it starts working its way through. And we end up with these really divisive things. And it seems to me that part of the division is because Congress isn't doing its job. It's abdicating power. And then part of it, I think, is what you're alluding to, is that the court actually, in many of these, if you really read through them, they're kind of giving us a roadmap to say, you could think about this different, or you could talk about this different.
Yeah, I mean, I think that each branch of the government needs to do its part. And so to the extent that the court, for example, will not announce a sort of broad ruling, but say that we want to just sort of create a framework and allow people to come to their own legislative compromises, then I think that's where the legislature has to step up and actually engage in that process instead of abdicating its own role. So so you're right to point out that I think an underlying point there is that for the court to be able to do this effectively, it has to be able to rely on other branches to do their job as well.
Yeah, no question. Final question for you. One of the other great and statements from your piece at Deseret was this whole idea that this is not Pollyanna, this is not group hug coming from the bench. It's clear legal reasoning and unifying rhetoric. Kind of walk us through how, as citizens, we should be looking and what we should be looking for as we keep our eye on the court in this new term.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing that up, because I think a lot of people tend to be dismissive of anything that's talking about the sort of addressing of multiple perspectives and diversity and so on. They sort of kind of think that as a touchy-feely project.
Yeah.
But in fact, it isn't. And historically, like some of the cases where the court has done this, for example, West Virginia v. Burnett, which involved protecting the right of Jehovah's Witness children to refuse to salute the flag, which in an opposite case, when it came to an opposite decision, actually led to tremendous violence against the Jehovah's Witness community and the children in particular. The court was very clear, like it used very decisive, strong language. And there's something about like the strength and clarity of that still served the purpose of the way that it kind of brought in Americans to agree with its vision, to understand the value of its vision, where America is a country where dissent is valued. And so nothing about this is about saying that the court needs to somehow sidestep disagreement or oversimplify complex matters. They can absolutely have clear, decisive language, but it can also create what I could call a surplus of meanings, where it can step beyond that too and just show that we can be decisive, we can be very clear and even colorful in our language, but we can still also create space that tells Americans how they can continue to negotiate on this and related issues.
Yeah, so powerful. Again, you can check out the piece at Deseret.com. It's called The Supreme Court's Hidden Power to Heal Our Nation. And I just love this framing of these rhetorical strategies that have to be every bit as powerful and are every bit as important as the jurisprudence and everything that's happening within the court. And Uzma, we always appreciate your perspective. It's brilliant thinking, it's brilliant writing, and I think it's an important step forward for all of us in the nation. Thank you so much for making time for us today.
Thank you, Boyd.
Such important conversation there. It's one everyone needs to go and read. Go to Deseret.com and check out Uzma Uddin's piece about the court and how it can be a unifying force in our nation. It's not the divisive thing that we often make it out to be. And if we look at the right kind of rhetoric around the court, we can have a completely different kind of discussion that will lead us to a completely different kind of result in the nation. We'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. Early voting has started in parts of Utah.
Polls opened around 8 o'clock, and they had a pretty steady stream of people coming in to vote.
Before you enter the booth or fill out the mail-in ballot, get in-depth coverage of the state races that matter to you. It's your voice, your vote. Elections 101 on KSL News Radio. In your car at 102.7 FM.
Now's a great time to think about your mortgage. Right now we've got the competitive rates, lowest rates they've been in a long time, and Hercules First Federal Credit Union will help you navigate all the things you need to do when looking at a mortgage option. They have all kinds of flexible products, fixed, adjustable, FHA, VA, including options for those who might have less than perfect credit. Because at Hercules Credit Union, you come first. It's about growing stronger together. And so they have a great program to help you get into just the kind of mortgage option that you need. First-time home buyer? No problem. They have all kinds of wonderful programs available to help you with a low down payment option, help really bring home ownership within your reach. Because at Hercules First Federal Credit Union, you aren't just a transaction, you're part of the family. It's about growing stronger together. They've been doing this since 1946. You can check out their locations in Taylorsville, Harriman, or Riverton. Or as always, you can find our friend at Hercules at HerculesCU.com. That's HerculesCU.com.
This is the story of a very special woman. Just a few knew about her superpowers. In a matter of seconds, she turned herself into a great mathematician. She masqueraded as a regular person at work, but as a superhero at home. Everyone knows her as Gabriella. I still call her Mom.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need to help, complete with tips and resources at aarp.org/caregiving. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Like any good agent, we're here for the open house, for the closing, for handing over keys. But because we're realtors, we're here for so much more. Agents who are realtors volunteer at nearly 3 times the national average. We're working to broaden access to credit, increase affordable housing supply, and ensure fair housing for all. And realtors are bound by a code of ethics. We're here for it all. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors. That's who we are.
Join the KSL Real Estate Show at a special time this Saturday. Listen at 8 a.m. before the BYU pregame. Learn how to choose the right real estate agent this Saturday morning at 8.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, investigators say yesterday's house fire in Holiday was caused by a child playing with a lighter. 8 people were injured, including 6 first responders. Second, President Russell M. Nelson of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints will personally dedicate the new temple in Tooele next month. And third, President Biden has apologized for the mistreatment of Native American children in government boarding schools. 60 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Get deeper insights on the news from Inside Sources.
Well, as Florida, South Carolina, and other southern states continue to reel and attempt to recover from the storms that crashed into their communities, it's raising a lot of questions about America's storm preparedness and the effect of climate change on storm severity, the impact of all of that. However, it might be one of those moments where we need to think again about what we think we know when we measure storm severity and what it actually means and what it doesn't mean, so that we can get to the right conversations, both in terms of climate, but also all the other things that are impacted as well. So as we look at that, we're really pleased to have joining us on the show today Harry Stevens, a climate columnist for the Washington Post, and a great piece at the Post talking about the real reason we have billion-dollar disasters like Hurricane Helene and others are getting more common. And Harry, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Boyd.
So let's dig into this, and I want to be very clear to all our listeners. This is not climate denial. This is not over the edge. We got to get rid of all the humans. So it's neither one of those. But it's one of those where if we don't have the right conversation, we're never going to get to the right kinds of solutions on all the issues that come out of these weather patterns and what's happening. And you did a beautiful job of breaking this down, Harry. And so kind of walk us through this kind of the history of how we've been measuring the impact of these storms.
There is a data set that's maintained by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, also called NOAA, which runs the National Weather Service and lots of other programs and does a lot of really great work on forecasting weather, preparing people for natural disasters, and generally like really good scientific work. But they also maintain this data set of $1 billion disasters that have struck the United States since 1980. So just any kind of weather disaster that caused $1 billion or more in damage. And that's a really valid sort of scientific question to ask, like what's the economic damage of weather on the U.S., on the U.S. economy? But a lot of times this data set, which has shown an increase in billion-dollar disasters, that increase is attributed in part or entirely to the role of global warming, while overlooking the role that societal growth, risky development, more property, more assets in harm's way have played in the increase in billion-dollar disasters. And so the story is just about, how this data set came to be and the efforts of scientists to try to disentangle all of those various causes to try to really understand what it is that's causing the rise in billion-dollar disasters.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, with that, I don't want to bury the lead, but, basically, when scientists have tried to detect a signal of climate change and rising disaster losses, and this is not specifically in the billion-dollar disaster data set because nobody's actually done the analysis on this data set, but on other, data sets of hurricane losses or, other hazard losses, scientists have not been able to detect the signal of climate change and rising disaster losses. And that's not because climate change isn't real or it's not important. It's just because the influence of societal growth is so much greater in rising disaster losses that it drowns out the signal of climate change in the data.
Yeah. And so that's such an important thing for us all to wrap our head around, because sometimes I think we get so lost in the wrong conversation. The number of times that these billion-dollar disaster data set, get quoted on the floor of the House or the Senate, or is the introduction of some new bill relating to climate. Again, it's part of the equation, but we've made it the equation in some instances, or just a good argument or a good talking point for either side. And so as you look at that, you actually referenced in your piece this billion-dollar disaster data set, and even looking at these recent storms in terms of how they apply in there, and then what is it? You talk about the societal growth and change. You kind of break that down for us in terms of what is it that we ultimately add up when we say, hey, we're having more of these billion-dollar disasters.
Yeah, it's sort of like until you really consider the role of societal growth, I think it's pretty natural to just assume that climate change might be the main driver behind the growth in these really expensive disasters. Hurricanes and wildfires, they're these really vivid events. And so your attention is naturally drawn to the hazard. And you don't tend to notice the sort of gradual growth in population and in wealth and in property over time. But the thing is that as that growth continues to compound and compound over time, it just ends up being a much larger factor. And so you look at things like, what they call the wildland urban interface, which is just, basically people building in places that are prone to wildfire. And, so since 1990, the number of people living or number of housing units in the wildland urban interface has increased from like 30 million to 45 million. And those aren't the exact numbers. You have to read my piece to get the exact ones. I don't have them on the top of my head, but it's something on that order of like 30 million to 45 million. So just way, way more people living in the wildland urban interface. And that's important, one, because most wildfires are started by humans. And so if you have more people in that area, that just means that there's a greater probability that wildfires will be started. And then because there are more people in that, wildland urban interface, there's just more stuff that's at risk. And so if the cost of wildfires has increased, you have to try to at least account for the role of societal growth before you can start to try to attribute any increase to global warming.
Yeah, and I think this is one of those really important conversations. We can have a conversation about the climate and the environment and the change and all of that that's happening. And we also have to just take into account that we have more wealth. We have more people building expensive homes on coastlines, which, again, results in more infrastructure, more jobs, more businesses, restaurants that are around those areas. And so part of this is just society growing, expanding, more affluence. So then when these storms do come through, the tally ends up being much more because we put more stuff in the path of these storms.
That's exactly right. And, also it has to do with how we mitigate that risk. So if you look at Hurricane Helene, there was a lot of really catastrophic inland flooding in the western North Carolina area, particularly around Asheville. And I get into this in the piece a little bit, but inland flooding is highly mediated by the stuff that we build to control flooding, things like dams and dikes, canals. And in the mid-20th century, the Tennessee Valley Authority built a lot of flood control dams on the Tennessee River and surrounding area in Tennessee. And those dams have prevented a lot of damage over the years. Tennessee Valley Authority estimates something like $9.6 billion in economic losses have been prevented because of its dams. And in the 60s, the TVA had a plan to put flood control dams, 14 of them, in fact, on the French Broad River upstream of Asheville. And those were stringently opposed by the local population, and for good reason. Like, the TVA had a reputation of using eminent domain to dispossess people of their land, kind of steamrolling people, flooding land that used to be used for agriculture. And so, people opposed that project, and it was never built. TVA scrapped the project in 1972. But, had those dams been built, it's certainly possible that they could have mitigated some of the horrible damage that was seen in Asheville, which has flooded repeatedly, for hundreds of years. And so, it's just one of those things that there is evidence that climate change made Helene's rainfall stronger and also made its wind speed stronger. And so those, probably had some impact on economic losses. But if you don't consider the role that society plays in mitigating those losses or exposing ourselves to more damage, then you can really miss a big part of the picture.
That's my conversation with Harry Stevens. And again, we think, okay, we've got these billion-dollar big-time storms, but is it just because the storms are bigger, or is it because we put more expensive stuff in the path of those storms? Something to think about. We'll step aside for bottom of the hour news. More Inside Sources coming up next.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story this hour. Parents of a woman accused of murdering her husband have also been arrested and could face serious charges in that case. Jennifer Gledhill's parents, Thomas and Rosalie, could face prison time if they're convicted. KSL legal analyst Greg Skorda says they lied to police about their location, even if they didn't lie about helping their daughter clean up after the murder.
They clearly lied to the police, according to this, and of course they're presumed innocent. But according to the neighbors,
that statement was a lie. When police are doing an investigation and they expect, especially a homicide investigation, they are entitled to people giving them truthful answers.
Skorda says those charges get more intense the more severe the crime connected to it. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Vice President Kamala Harris campaigning today in Texas, the state she's not expected to win. And if she does become president, she was asked how she'd deal with her promise to expand abortion rights with a hostile Congress.
We keep fighting. And our country, America, has a history of understanding. We don't give up the fight for freedom.
Harris says restrictions on abortion since the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade have caused real harm. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average now closing trading today down 259 points, while the NASDAQ finished up 103. The S&P 500 was up just 1.74. And our KSL weather looks like it's going to warm up around here for a day or two. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:31.
News doesn't just mean information or dates.
It's the story of our local history being told in real time.
Be a part of the story. This is Tim Hughes and Amanda Dixon.
We hope to be a part of your story. We have you covered on KSL News Radio. In 2024, dating is a disaster.
We've been ghosted, breadcrumbed, stuck in situationships. Hi, I'm Debbie. I'm Caitlin. Welcome to our new podcast, Dating at Her Age.
Dating has been so dicey for us, we asked KSL, can we launch an all-new podcast about it?
People use these dating apps. You're not really dating when you're on the dating app.
Dating at Her Age, brought to you by Mountain Home Services. A new episode drops every Thursday on KSLNewsRadio.com.
This is Derek Overstreet of the New Millennium Group and host of Stop Working and Start Living Radio. If you're close to or in retirement and you don't have a tax plan, call us right now, 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370. Listen, our country's been spending like never before, and the tax bill is coming soon. If you need an income tax strategy and a financial plan that will get you through the rest of your life, give my team a call, 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370. If you want an investment plan that allows you to keep more of your gains and pay less taxes, give us a call, 888-999-6370. My team specializes in the type of plan that will get you retired 3 to 5 years sooner than you thought possible. So, get a no-cost tax analysis by calling 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370. My team is standing by now.
Want to avoid getting sick this fall? Getting your immunizations is a classic approach. You can protect yourself against the flu, RSV, pneumonia, and COVID. Does that sound like music to your ears? Then talk to a doctor or healthcare provider. And visit uptodate.utah.gov to learn more.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Here's Ricky Meese.
It's a crash-free drive on your Valley freeways, but we do have traffic filling in and slowing down already between 4500 South and 7200 South in Midvale for your Friday afternoon drive. But right now, we do have kind of a quiet commute on the freeways and the main secondaries with no accidents reported. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
A little bit warmer today with a high of 66. We'll get into the mid-70s this weekend, then drop back to the 60s on Monday. On Tuesday, it'll be colder with rain likely. And right now, 62 degrees and sunny. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson.
On Utah's home for elevated conversation.
Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
The phrase draining the swamp started as a pledge to eliminate corruption and special interest. It's since evolved, and I think we've drained the meaning of drain the swamp. It's really evolved into a competition of who can offer more targeted benefits to specific groups, especially lawyers, lobbyists, and supporters. Both major candidates for the presidency have pivoted from reform to redistribution. So we're faced with this fundamental question about the nature of governance, fairness, the future of our constitutional republic here in America. So we want to dig into this in terms of what are the issues that arise from having all America not drain the swamp, but join the swamp. Really pleased to have joining us, as always, Veronique Derougy, contributing editor at Reason. Also, she's a senior research fellow at Mercatus Center at George Mason University. And Veronique, we've drained the meaning out of drain the swamp. What do you think it means? How should we look at this?
So I think it means two distinct things. So my understanding of what it means is basically you stop having government that functions for special interest and people connected to politicians, but also to bureaucrats. And I think there's another broader meaning, which is one, that has to do with the deep state, where basically you have entrenched bureaucrats who actually have a lot of power and that's disconnected with what the voters want. But, I mean, those two things are somewhat connected in the end.
Yeah. And so those are the connected points, and those are the things we often hear sold by campaigns and politicians. You offered a different meaning, that it actually is more a call to come join the swamp rather than actually drain the swamp. Tell us how we got there.
Well, so one of the things that I wanted to write about the fact that this campaign, whether it's President Trump or VP Harris, has been all about actually bringing people into the swamp by making a lot of promises about what different special group would be getting if either of them was elected. And so they're making promises that are very specific to their own campaigns, but some of the promises that they're making are very driven, targeting the same special interest. So, for instance, both of them have proposed to eliminate tax on tips. That's one thing that they have in common, and that's really it's ultimately a tax policy that is not targeting everyone. It's just targeting a very specific group. I'm sure that people who earn tips love that idea, but what targeted policy means? It means that eventually we're going to have to raise taxes on everyone else because of all these targeted policies.
Yeah, and as you look at that, it is I think the populism is basically calling everyone to the swamp and saying, "Come on in, the water's fine." And we got something for you.
Yeah, and if you want to think about some of the things that they've said, right? President Trump has talked about no taxes on Social Security. He's basically right there making a promise to people who are retired. Then VP Harris has promised forgivable loans of $20,000 to Black entrepreneur. Now she's extended it to minorities, but still it's very targeted. She has promised lots of subsidies for childcare. That's just targeting parents, obviously. And here's the problem. You can say, well, these are tax cuts. Sure, they're tax cuts, but they're not generalized tax cuts. The best form of tax policies that are the ones that are general, that broaden the base, and then allows for lower rates for everyone, independently of what you do. And this is exactly the opposite of what these guys are doing.
Yeah, these very targeted, and often those with the most lawyers and lobbyists and friends in crucial places seem to get these very targeted kinds of things, which really lead to good outcomes. One of the things you pointed out in your piece, I think is really important for all of us to think about or think again about, is that a lot of these handouts or these things that sound good from the campaign trail often don't do what we think they're going to do. And you actually pointed to something like Solyndra as one of those cautionary tales.
Well, so the idea, so Solyndra, people know about that company because it failed, leaving taxpayers with a bill of $538 million. That was during the Obama years. But the way that happened is because at the time, it was actually a program that was started by President Bush, and really kind of stepped up during the Obama years. And these were extending loan guaranteed to green energy companies, especially solar and wind. And the idea is that somehow the government can convince or can help bring to light some sort of entrepreneurship that wouldn't happen if it weren't for this guaranteed offer by the government. And what Solyndra showed, and many other examples, like very often there's a reason why these companies are actually not getting capital from the private sector, and that is that they don't have a good project. Right. And when they get capital to get going, it doesn't go any better because they have the government funding. And in the end, taxpayers pay. But the worst part, and I didn't really have, I think I mentioned it in the piece, I think the worst part about these type of programs that are here, it's targeted to corporate interests, is the fact that a lot of the time, the government ends up giving money or extending, like, for instance, lower borrowing costs to companies that were going to do the thing they're getting now subsidized to do. Yeah. And they were going to do it without the government help. So if you take the Inflation Reduction Act, more than half of the projects were actually announced before the legislation was even anyone knew it was going to get through.
Yeah.
And so what happens is you have a lot of big corporations who want to do a bunch of stuff. We're planning on doing it all on their own, and now they're getting subsidized. And how do they get picked? In general, it's because they have relationship with the company, with the government. Yeah. They have relationship with politicians.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And Veronique, always great insight, great perspective. Thanks for carving out a little bit of time for us today. This is a crucial conversation that we need to continue, because often this hurts our small businesses, our medium businesses who are really trying to compete, and it stifles innovation. It keeps costs high, not good for consumers or for the public either. Veronique, as always, thanks so much for joining us today. Great perspective.
Thank you.
All right, that's Veronique Derougy from Reason, contributing editor at Reason, senior research fellow at Mercatus Center at George Mason University. And I just want to drill down on this for just a second more, because some of the things that she talked about are so vital. So this draining of the swamp, everybody loves it as a bumper sticker. But often what they're doing, the politicians are doing, is saying, hey, well, if you're on my team, or if you're voting for me, or if you're donating to my campaign, then we're gonna do things and send things your way. And it's not based on best ideas, not based on, as Veronique said, not based on that this wouldn't happen if government didn't help. Most of the time, these are projects that companies were going to do and fund on their own. But because they have connections, because they have a big army of lobbyists, because they've developed relationships with those in power, then they get that money. And so what does it do? It makes the big bigger, and it keeps the real innovators, the entrepreneurs, the small and medium business owners who are really trying to innovate, make it better, make it cheaper, more affordable, more effective. It keeps them out of the game because they simply cannot compete with that kind of power. So when we talk about draining the swamp, we got to redefine what it means. We've drained all the meaning out of draining the swamp. And Veronique was absolutely right. What it really means these days is come on in. The water's nice. Don't drain it. Just come and join it. You'll find you actually like it. And that's part of the problem. That's why we got to rethink again.
I finally decided a few months ago that enough was enough with the high electrical bills in the summer and the high heating bills in the winter, and it was time to replace our builder-grade windows of our 20-year-old home with the latest and greatest windows from Advanced Window Products. Ever since Jake and Nate showed me a demonstration of what a difference the right kind of window can have on my home's energy use, I couldn't get it off my mind. So my wife and I decided it was time, And man, am I glad we did. From the moment Ken showed up to give us a free in-home estimate, we've had such an outstanding experience through the entire process. Within an hour, we had financing set up, and then about 8 weeks later, the crew showed up and did what we thought was going to be a 2-day installation in a single day. Now our home is more comfortable. Our electrical bills have started to drop. We qualified for Energy Tracks credits to help pay for the windows. And we even took advantage of their expertise and replaced our sliding glass deck door with one that has a pet door built in. Look, I know you don't make a decision like this on a whim. You do your research. So do that. But make sure you call Advanced Window Products at 801-850-9100, and you can get a special deal of $3,000 off 10 windows or more if you mention Andy when you make the appointment. 801-850-9100 or go to advancedwindows.com.
Hey, it's Michael Smirkanish. Business owners and CMOs, how do you plan on growing your business? Have you plateaued on your social media and online efforts? Why not tap into podcasts and radio? In the U.S., audio reaches more than 271 million people weekly. That's more than social media and digital combined. My friends at Radioactive Media know the recipe to launch, optimize, and scale performance by building compelling audio campaigns which work. I personally know the principles of Radioactive Media, their personal approach and knowledge of the medium, unparalleled. For advertisers who want to reach the right audience with the right hosts and programs, text the word profits to 511-511. Heck, you can even buy spots on my program. If you're a mid-sized company or well-funded startup with a monthly budget as low as 5 figures, they can help. Text the word profits to 511-511. Online, radioactivemedia.com. Text rates may apply.
Febreze. So my home is also my office. And before I can focus, every room's gotta be clean. That means tidying up and spraying my Febreze Air Mist. Ooh, that's fresh. Febreze Air Mist scents are all high quality. They fight any weird funk, and they give my air an instant boost of freshness. So not only does my home smell good, I feel good too. After I Febreze, it's time to start my day. Breathe happy, Febreze, la 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 la.
Want to keep your gas-powered engines running like new? Stable's proprietary formulas are proven by third-party testing to outperform the competition in keeping fuel fresh, preventing corrosion, and cleaning the entire fuel system. With Stable, you can have confidence you are doing the right thing for your engine's long-term health. Just pour into your gas can or fuel tank, then top off with fresh fuel. At every fill-up or when you store, start with Stable. Available where fuel additives are sold.
Any Hour Services free furnace sale is going on right now. If you haven't scheduled your free estimate yet, what are you waiting for? Call Any Hour Services today or schedule online at anyhourservices.com.
This is Jeff Stout with Fink and McGregor, Mortgages Made Simple. There are lots of mortgage lenders out there, so why choose Fink and McGregor? Here are some good reasons. We are a broker. That means we can shop loan terms on your behalf, including loan programs, rates, and closing costs. We make it easy. We can take your application within a few short minutes, either on the phone or in person, on our fast application website, 4minutemortgage.com. We can help sift through options to find the best solution for you. This can include loan programs, credit fixes, or loan strategies. We are fast, really fast. Most loans close within a couple weeks. Start to finish, we are here for you. Apply today at 4minutemortgage.com. Fink and McGregor, Mortgages Made Simple, 801-264-9494. That's 264-9494. Or on the web at finkmcgregor.com. NMLS 289115.
It's official. KSL Sports is your official radio home of the Utah Hockey Club. When the puck hits the ice this fall, you'll hear every goal, every check, and every tension-filled moment on the KSL Sports Zone. Plus, let your voice be heard on the Utah Hockey Club Fan Forum on KSLSports.com, your exclusive home of the NHL and the Utah Hockey Club in Utah is KSL Sports and 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bonas. First, the parents of a woman accused of shooting her husband are now facing obstruction of justice charges. Second, Vice President Harris promised to keep fighting for abortion rights, even if she's dealing with a hostile Congress. And third, the group trying to bring Major League Baseball to Utah isn't buying a survey that lists Salt Lake 53rd on the list of potential host cities. Right now, 63 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today, as always. I am Boyd Matheson. As we round out the program today, we've been talking a lot this week about the election. Obviously, we're 11 days out, and now we're going to talk about time. It's such an interesting thing. We've discussed this throughout the week this week, and I really believe it's time to choose, and it's time to choose the present time. So as we get to the waning days of the 2024 election season, let's talk about time. It is so amazing to me, astounding to me, really, how the political campaigns have become all about time. Politicians are brilliant at playing with time. And far too often, far too many of us as voters, as citizens, we somehow come to believe that elected officials and those running for office can actually control time. Many of you know I spent a lot of years as a business consultant trying to convince executives and employees that there really is no such thing as time management. There's no such thing as time management. By definition, to manage means you're going to hold it, mold it, shape it, or form it, control it, influence or have direct control over it. None of which you can do with time. You can't hold time. You can't shape it or form it. You can't influence it to speed it up. You can't control it and slow it down. You can't even hoard it and save it for later. Time just rolls. So what does that leave you with? It leaves you with choice management. I actually believe in that. And I believe in choice management because you can manage your choices and what you choose to do at any moment in the present. Only in the present. Now, you may be asking yourself, what does time and choice management have to do with the 2024 political cycle? A brilliant essay this week in Christianity Today, Miles Wernz cautioned that time is not, should not, and must not become a political promise. Wernz described what politicians and candidates are doing with time. He said this promise takes different forms for different politics. Some candidates pledge to bring a better future. Others say they'll return us to a better past. The direction of the promise matters less than the fact of it. Once we have decided that time can be managed, it's just a matter of picking which time we prefer. As an example, Wernz pointed out how the two leading contenders in this year's presidential election have particularly obvious and dueling notions about time. He wrote, the Harris campaign's catchphrase, "We're not going back, forward," rejects the past, while the Trump campaign's promise to make America great again lurches in reverse. Despite their policy divides, both campaigns trade on dissatisfaction with the world as it is, and both look to some other time as the solution. Now, Wernz concluded his piece saying, as a political strategy, it's effective. Discontent with the present, Americans ask when, if ever, life was better than this. And both candidates happen to have a ready answer. Former President Donald Trump's reply is a particular rendering of the past, one that omits some historical wrongs and insists old greatness can be recaptured. Vice President Harris, on the other hand, peers into the misty future. And while she may not be able to offer certainty about what the future holds, whatever the challenge, she assures us it'll be better than what was behind us. Now, neither of these political strategies, rhetorical strategies, are the answer to what ails the country, and they cannot provide the solutions that the nation desperately needs. So let me break that down. Backward-facing mantras about the past time, disconnected from the present, only provide us a form of cheap nostalgia and even some false hope. Likewise, dredging up the grievance of the past might help justify our current anger and angst, fear and frustration about present problems, but nothing more. Truly, the good old days have been and gone. They're impossible to bring back, and rehashing past wrong just breeds bitterness and contempt, but does nothing to improve the present. Now, it is true that we should learn from the past, big believer in that. We should lean on the principles that propelled freedom and justice and self-government and upward mobility, for sure. But we have to apply those principles in practical, tactical, and pragmatic ways today, in the present. There's an old proverb that says, a society grows great when old men and women plant trees whose shade they know they will never sit in. You see, you can't go back and plant that shade tree 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago, or even yesterday for that matter. You can only plant a shade tree in the present of today. Likewise, you cannot grow great and plant shade trees tomorrow or in some far-off distant time and place. It also has to be done today, in the present. Now, there's a public philosopher, Roman Krznaric, former political scientist, and he's been challenging people around the planet to abandon this fantasy that comes from an irresponsible colonizing of the future. So future time. He actually wrote in the BBC, he said that time has become it is time to face an inconvenient reality. That modern democracy, especially in wealthy countries, has enabled us to colonize the future. We treat the future like a distant colonial outpost, devoid of people, where we can freely dump ecological degradation, technological risk, nuclear waste, and public debt, and that we feel at liberty to plunder as we please. He actually points back to Britain's colonization of Australia back in the 18th and 19th century, and it drew on this legal doctrine, terra nullius, meaning nobody's land. They used that to justify the conquest, to treat the indigenous population as if they didn't exist or have any claim on the land. Today, on the other hand, we sort of have a different version of that, tempus nullius. In other words, that the future is empty time, unclaimed territory, similar devoid of inhabitants. So like the distant realms of the empire, it's ours for the taking. So these empty political promises in the empty time of the future are delusional. They're often irresponsible. And sometimes the sweeping generalities of such political promises keep us a safe distance from solving real problems and planting those shade trees for future generations. Again, a society grows great. We've got to have that as an objective. Every leader should have that as an objective. And it includes getting to the right policies. So to win a immediate election or a political battle, it's easy to breathlessly claim that we need to go back to what once was, past time, or declare hollow and empty promises and policy proposals that are never going to see the light of day in future time. It's easy to do that. But that's not what leadership is about. It's not about just going back to the past. It's not about just projecting forward into sweeping generalities of the future. It requires leadership today. So when it comes to political time, I think one politician may have gotten it right. Ronald Reagan said that it wasn't a time to go back to a distant past, nor was it a time to leap into the far-off future. It wasn't time to go to the political left or to the political right. He simply declared that it was time to choose. A time to choose. Now, that's something you can only do in the present. Reagan declared that what the people choose today will ultimately impact the future. He concluded by saying our choices in the present today will either preserve for our children the last best hope on earth, or will sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness. Such a choice is always made in the present. So leaders can remind us of past greatness and success. Leaders can give us a compelling vision of the future and what's possible. But leadership only happens in the present. So choosing leaders who will do the hard work and heavy lifting today in the present are the ones we need to get behind. So it is a time to choose, for each of us, to choose the present. That wraps it up for us today. I'm Boyd Matheson. Thanks for joining us. And as always, as you go out into the world today, make sure you see something that inspires, say something that uplifts, and do something that makes a difference.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, this is KSL News Radio.
Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Good afternoon. It's 3 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Jeff Kaplan. 63 degrees, KSL's top story. The Cottonwood Heights woman accused of killing her National Guardsman husband was back in court today, a day after her parents were arrested in the case. We have team coverage. Let's begin with KSL News Radio's Britt Johnson. She joins us live with the latest. Britt.
Jeff, I was in the courtroom today, and Gledhill was incredibly stoic and emotionless. This is a big shift from her demeanor since her last emotional court appearance. She didn't even